There is a man most people have never doubted. Not once. Not for a single frame. You watch him appear on screen and something in your body simply relaxes, like a muscle you didn't realize you were holding tight. That voice arrives before he does, low and steady, like thunder that never quite breaks into a storm. That face, carved out of something that took decades to form. That stillness, the kind that only comes from a man who has lived through so much that nothing left in the world can rattle him anymore. Sam Elliott became the most trusted face in American cinema not because Hollywood made him that way, but in spite of everything Hollywood did to stop him. And now, at 81 years old, the man who spent his entire life being the one person nobody doubted is carrying wounds so deep and so quietly kept that when you finally understand what his life has really cost him, it does not just move you. It breaks something open inside you that takes a long time to close. To understand what Sam Elliott is living with today, you have to go back to a living room floor in Northeast Portland, Oregon. He was 18 years old. His father, Henry Nelson Elliott, was 54. Henry was not a gentleman in the emotional sense. He was a predator control specialist for the United States Department of the Interior, a man who spent his professional life hunting and eliminating threats from the land. He brought that same energy home. Discipline was his language. Approval was something he rationed carefully, and warmth was something he seemed to believe a man could live without. Sam had grown up under that, always reaching, always trying to earn something his father kept just out of reach. When Sam was at the University of Oregon, studying English and psychology but already certain in his bones that acting was the only direction his life was meant to go, he sat down and told his father directly. He told him what he wanted to do with his life, what he believed he was built for. Henry listened. He looked at his son. And then, in a calm, deliberate voice, he said the words that would follow Sam Elliott for the rest of his life. You've got a snowball's chance in hell of having a career in Hollywood. Not difficult. Not unlikely. Impossible. A snowball in hell does not shrink slowly. It disappears the moment it touches the ground. That is what his father believed about his son's dream. Sam held his father's hand that day and swore he would prove him wrong. He promised not that he would try, but that he would do it. And then, not long after, his father collapsed on that living room floor. His heart gave out. He was gone before the ambulance could have made a difference. Sam heard his mother scream, that specific kind of scream that tells you everything has already changed before you even reach the room. He ran in, and his father was on the floor, and the chance to prove anything to that man was simply over. Just like that. The man he had been trying to reach his whole life was gone, and Sam was left holding a promise he could no longer deliver. What followed was not a story of immediate redemption. It was a story of 20 years in the wilderness, and the word wilderness does not capture it fully. Sam Elliott spent 2 decades being seen and then passed over, being noticed and then ignored, being almost but never quite. He moved to Los Angeles carrying nothing but that voice, that face, and his father's skepticism ringing in his ears. He worked construction to pay the bills. 6'2" in a hard hat, driving nails into houses that were not his, while the studios he had come to conquer sat just close enough to see and just far enough to feel impossible. He joined the California Air National Guard's 146th Airlift Wing at Van Nuys Airport, which the industry had long called the Hollywood Guard because it sat right beside the studios. He served his time and then stepped back into the same cycle. Work, auditions, rejection, silence. He appeared in a Chevron commercial. He played a cowboy in Falstaff beer advertisements. The image that would later define him was already there, but it was being used to sell beer, not build a legacy. He got small roles, blink and miss them appearances in television shows like Gunsmoke, Mission Impossible, Hawaii Five-0, and each time he showed up, delivered, and then disappeared back into the waiting. One casting agent told him to cut the mustache, said it looked funny, said nobody had ever told him that before. Sam stood there and refused. That refusal cost him work. It closed doors. But he would not remove the thing that felt most like himself just to become something the industry found easier to digest. He was too real for what Hollywood wanted in those years. Too settled. Too certain of who he already was. And the industry had no category for a man who wasn't searching for himself. There are reports of a journal Sam kept during those years, where for a full year, every single day, he wrote the same 4 words on the page. I am not a failure. Day after day after day, 365 times, writing it down like a man trying to convince himself of something his circumstances were constantly arguing against. When he reached the last page, he held it in his hands and broke down entirely, crying hard the way a man cries when he has been holding too much in for too long. That journal is not the story of a man who was losing. It is the story of a man who was barely winning against the version of himself that had internalized his father's voice. His first real leading role came in 1976 with Lifeguard, where he played a man quietly confronting the gap between the life he had imagined and the life he was actually living. It did not feel like acting. It felt like autobiography. It moved him emotionally in ways he did not fully expect. And yet even that did not change the fundamental reality. The years kept moving and the breakthrough kept not arriving. Then came a different kind of arrival. Not a career moment, but a human one. In 1978, on the set of a film called The Legacy, Sam Elliott stood across from Katharine Ross for the first time as something other than a background figure. They had technically shared a screen in 1969 on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but in that film he was a glorified extra in a bar scene and she was the leading lady, and he has said plainly that he didn't dare try to speak to her then. She caught his eye once and gave a small wave, and he held on to that moment because it was the only one he had. 9 years later, The Legacy changed the geometry between them. They were cast as a couple. They had to look at each other, speak to each other, build something on camera, and what grew there was not a performance. It was quieter and more careful than that, more honest than the fast relationships either of them had seen come apart before. She had been married 4 times. She was experienced and careful and not particularly hopeful about love anymore. Sam had never been married at all. They were moving toward each other from opposite directions. In May 1984, they got married. It was his first marriage and her 5th. 4 months later, their daughter Cleo Rose Elliott was born. In one season, Sam Elliott became a husband and a father. He has said more than once, simply and without performance, that Katharine is the love of his life. He means it in the way that only people who have come close to losing things understand. But the home they built together was not a place that stayed peaceful. Behind what the world saw was something darker and more painful, something that broke open on March 2, 2011, when Cleo was 26 years old. An argument started at the Malibu home. It escalated fast and violently. Cleo told her mother she wanted to kill her. She kicked a kitchen cabinet door hard enough to splinter it off its hinges. When Katharine tried to call the police, Cleo cut the phone line with scissors, trapping her inside the house. And then Cleo attacked her mother 6 times with those scissors, stabbing her arm repeatedly with enough force to break through her shirt and leave wounds that Katharine herself has said are still visible today. A restraining order was granted on March 8. Police had to escort Cleo if she came near the property. In court, Katharine said the violence had been building since Cleo was around 12 or 13 years old. Sam Elliott, the man America looked at as the definition of steady and unshakable, was living inside a home filled with a fear he could not control or fix. He later spoke about the nights that followed, waking suddenly, hearing his wife's screams replaying in his mind. At some point he sat down with his daughter, held her hands, looked her directly in the eyes, and said, "I forgive you. Don't ever do that again." There was no anger left in his voice. Only pain. The restraining order was eventually dropped. They stayed together as a family. But the pain of those years did not vanish. It settled in. It became part of what he carries. The career breakthrough, when it finally came, arrived at the exact moment it was supposed to, which is to say far later than it should have. Roadhouse in 1989. Sam was 44 years old. He played Wade Garrett, not the lead but the man whose presence changed every scene he entered, calm and weathered and carrying the accumulated weight of a long life. People started asking who he was, and this time the answer held. Then came Tombstone in 1993, where as Virgil Earp, he demonstrated something that performances built on technique alone cannot produce, which is the visible cost of doing the right thing. The weight that comes with it. Then The Big Lebowski in 1998, where the Coen brothers used his voice as the philosophical anchor of the entire film and introduced him to a generation that would carry that image forward for decades. And then in 2018, at 73 years old, A Star is Born gave the world a scene it could not look away from. Sam Elliott sat across from Bradley Cooper and carried an entire emotional history in the silence before he spoke. Critics wrote about him as though they had just discovered him, and that part almost felt strange, because he had been there the whole time. But the recognition did not arrive without cost. In February 2022, on comedian Marc Maron's WTF podcast, Sam spoke openly and critically about The Power of the Dog, a film that had received 12 Academy Award nominations. He questioned its authenticity as a Western, mocked certain elements of the production, and made comments about the film's themes that many in the industry heard as dismissive toward the LGBTQ community. The reaction was immediate and sharp. The same industry that had just finished celebrating him turned quickly. Director Jane Campion responded directly, and that same season she won the Academy Award for Best Director, which meant the moment stayed in the room for a long time. To his credit, Sam did not disappear from it. He showed up publicly and said plainly that he had said things that hurt people and that he felt terrible about that. He apologized to Campion, calling her a brilliant director. He apologized to Benedict Cumberbatch. And then he said the line that landed most honestly: "The gay community has been incredible to me my entire career, and I am sorry I hurt any of those friends." The humility in that moment made people who had turned on him turn back. And now it is 2025, and Sam Elliott is 81 years old, and the body is telling the truth that decades of physical work on film sets do not let you keep hidden forever. In November 2025, speaking with Deadline alongside his Landman co-star Billy Bob Thornton ahead of the show's second season premiere on Paramount+, Sam was more candid about his physical condition than he has ever been publicly. He said that 1883 beat him in ways both old and new. He had a fall during production. He now lives with 2 torn tendons in his hip that doctors have told him are not going to heal. Some mornings, simply getting out of bed is a sustained effort. And then there is the hearing. Decades of blank rounds fired at close range on film sets, the full loads used throughout 1883 and throughout a career stretching back 60 years, have done permanent damage. He told Deadline plainly, "I can't hear anything anymore because of all the gunfire." He has been around it his whole life. He paid for every scene with something his body kept the score on, and now the score is being settled. After 1883 finished, he did not work for years. He turned down offers. He rested. He stayed home with Katharine, with his family, dealing quietly with what the years had taken. It was Taylor Sheridan who pulled him back, texting him out of nowhere and telling him simply, "I'm going to put your ass back to work." And so at 81, with torn tendons and significant hearing loss and a body shaped by 60 years of hard physical labor in service of making other people feel something real, Sam Elliott is back on a Paramount+ set playing T.L. Norris, an estranged father trying to reach a son who struggles to reach him back. There is nothing accidental about that casting. Life has a way of finding the roles that fit. His father died at 54. Sam has now outlived him by 27 years. 27 years of moments Henry Nelson Elliott never saw. Every film. Every award. Every quiet evening on the ranch in Malibu with Katharine beside him. The house in Northeast Portland, the one where Henry died on the living room floor, still belongs to Sam. He never sold it. He has never been able to fully walk away from it. And after more than 40 years of marriage, after everything that tried to take their family apart, Katharine is still there. Not because the story was easy or clean or free of damage, but because they chose it again and again through everything that made choosing it hard. Sam said once that she is the best decision he ever made. When you know what that decision survived, the sentence stops being simple. It becomes something heavier and more earned than most people will ever fully understand. At 81, Sam Elliott is not living in a triumphant ending. He is living in the truth that endurance is its own kind of legacy. That staying, continuing, refusing to disappear even when your body hurts and your hearing is going and the wound from your father's voice never fully closed, that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the whole story. And it will break you completely, not because it is sad, but because it is real.